Well, friends, it is the top of the hour, and I am just thrilled to be here. Tonight, we have been looking forward to gathering and looking forward to hearing from both James Howell and Kimberly Orr. Our webinar tonight, as you know, Unrevealed Until Its Season, a Lenten Journey with Hymns. And I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you from us at the Upper Room. At the Upper Room, it's our mission to invite people to create daily life with God. And author and pastor, Reverend Dr. James C. Howell is here. Reverend Kimberly Orr, the publisher of the Upper Room, is here. And I'll introduce them in just a moment. But before I do that, I've got a few housekeeping details that I want to relay to you. First of all, I am Sharon Conley Cottingham, and I serve as the Director of Formational Learning at the Upper Room. I want you to know that we're recording this session, and unless you object to having your visage portrayed in our recording, you can click off your video if you prefer to do that, but we enjoy seeing your faces. We will share this recording with people who have registered but are unable to join us live. If you have any questions for our presenters as we go through our session, I'm going to welcome you to add those to chat. We have a pretty large crowd tonight. Those of you who are regulars in our e-learning world know we usually unmute and chat. It's a little too big of a group to do that. So I invite you as we're going through to just note any questions that you have in chat and to stay muted so that we don't hear your rustling potato chips and your barking dogs. I'd also like to just thank Ben Crumley for offering tech support tonight. Ben, I don't know if you want to say hello. Ben, we're more likely to hear Ben's young children in the background than we are his dogs, right, Ben?
Absolutely, and hopefully you won't have to, but yes, my young children are probably going to be getting ready for bed here soon. But anyway, my name's Ben Crumley. I'm actually a staff person with the Upper Room. I'm here tonight just to help any technical service needs we might need to help keep our event going. So you shouldn't have to hear from me, because if you do, it means something's going wrong. So everybody enjoy yourself tonight. I know I will.
And thank you. And thanks to a lot of other people who you won't meet tonight who have supported both the creation and development of this book, the eCourse, our evening tonight, and very grateful to know that as people of faith, we can rely on the presence of God to be among us. And so God's Spirit is indeed here, even in a Zoom space. So the book we're going to hear a lot about tonight is Unrevealed Until Its Season, a Lenten Journey with Hymns. And this book welcomes us to muse not on entire hymns, but on portions, on phrases from hymns, and through daily devotional readings. And each week offers a different theme for our consideration. And the Upper Room welcomes you to purchase a copy of the book or the EPUB, also to join us for our eCourse, and more details are forthcoming on that. But first, we want to listen in on a conversation, as promised, between our publisher, the publisher of the Upper Room, Kimberly Orr, Reverend Kimberly Orr, and Reverend Dr. James C. Howell. So I'm going to introduce both of them, and then we're just going to dive into conversation. So James Howell is a prolific author. He is a lover of hymns, a beloved of God, and since 2003, senior pastor at Myers Park United Methodist Church in Myers Park, North Carolina. He has spent quite a bit of time in North Carolina, I presume, given he has both an MDiv and a PhD from Duke University. And as I understand it, James, if this is true, South Carolina was home at one point. So we have learned from some reliable sources that James also did a stint as Captain Von Trapp in a community theater version of The Sound of Music. And that stint was complete with dancing and singing and even on stage kissing. So I would like you to know that that is part of our presenter's background as well. So James, we're really glad that you're here tonight, and will not ask you to offer any rendition of anything from The Sound of Music tonight.
Thank you.
Kimberly Orr has just completed her first year as the publisher of The Upper Room. And Kimberly came to us from the Texas Annual Conference in Windsor Village, United Methodist Church, where she pastored as an ordained elder and pastor of spiritual formation for 10 years. Kimberly is very passionate about inviting people to create daily life with God. And she comes to this work with so much creative energy and incredible gifts as a teacher and a pastor and a scholar and a musician. Kimberly is also an avid fan of sumo wrestling. So if you have sumo wrestling questions haunting you, Kimberly may be the person who can answer those questions. And Kimberly, it's just a real privilege to work alongside you. I'm so glad you're both here tonight. Well, I'm going to invite Kimberly and James just to dive into conversation. And the first question I want to ask them about is your relationship with hymns of the faith, music, and worship. And James, if you'll launch us, what's your background and relationship with all things hymns and music and worship?
Well, like a lot of people, I love music. My mother wanted me to be a concert pianist, so I had to take piano lessons forever. Didn't like it that much. I wasn't that much of a church guy growing up. So I liked more Chopin, Led Zeppelin, all kinds of music. Once I got involved in church, I found the hymns really spoke to me. One time I went on a retreat, and I'm someone who at that point would have said, I really struggle with prayer. I'm not good at praying. And this nun did this personality inventory, and it turns out different people have different spiritualities, not surprising. And with mine, she said, I bet you really resonate to congregational hymn singing. Well, I do. It really thrills me. And so I've also, though, tried to learn how to slow down. I took speed reading years ago. And the one thing I learned in the course is I don't want to speed read. I want to read slowly and ponder, savor the words. So I've tried to do that with hymns. I wrote a book that Upper Room put out, I think 3 years ago, on Christmas carols. And that was great fun. So I thought I'd try my hand at some non-Christmas hymns, and it issued in this book. Great fun to write. I wrote it right here, wrote a lot of it sitting right here at my own piano. I play a little bit of a hymn and reflect on it, and sing it, and write a little. And it was great fun. There's a lot in there, as you probably know already.
I love that you learned to play the piano early, James, and that you have the piano in the background, because that's how I was introduced to hymns. My mother's family is a part of a musical family, and I grew up with my mother playing hymns as some of my earliest memories. So every occasion that my family could get together on her side, we would stand around some piano in some family home and sing hymns. And I learned the old Baptist and Methodist hymns at the feet of a great uncles and aunts and my mother. So it's been a lifelong tradition.
And both of you musicians in your own right. Kimberly, tell us a little bit about your love for music and how that expresses itself.
Oh, absolutely. As I just said, I sort of grew up in a musical family with lots of singers and players of instruments. And I found myself in high school really feeling drawn to the world of music as a career. And so my first 2 degrees actually are in music. And in particular, I spent a lot of time when I wasn't in school studying music. I was a church music director, choir director at small churches in East Texas, the language of hymns was a common language, regardless of generation. When I was going to college, and it was not only an entry way for worship, but also for theology. To be able to talk about the gospel in a fresh way, and hymns being, again, that sort of common language. So that's where I sort of cut my teeth on diving into the hymn world, was in music school.
Yeah, and I'd just add, the Irish poet John Donahue said, music is what language would be if it could. So I'm a professional talker, but music can do stuff I can't do talking. It can do better stuff. It can go deeper.
Yeah.
But it's not just music, right? It's not just melodies and harmonies. There are words in there. And especially our older hymn writers, I mean, they packed a lot of powerful images and all in there. And if you dwell on it, if you ponder it, there's just so much richness there. And it touches something deep, though, because it also has that tune. It opens up something in the soul that just words can't do.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, most people realize, I think, that a hymn is actually the poem. It's actually the words, not the music. The earliest hymn books don't have any music in them. They have just the words, and then they would have a suggestion for a hymn tune and give the meter, right? And so you're absolutely right, that depth of poetry coupled with the hymn tune itself makes that perfect package of communication. Yeah.
Just a thought that, forgive me, I'm off script here, but I'm wondering, when we're singing together in person, there's this kind of vibrational resonance that happens. There's a physicality to it. I'm wondering if you'd speak into that a little bit. What's going on physically when we're singing together? And then any insight into what you think we're missing in this Zoom world where we don't have a lot of that experience of kind of communal singing. I mean, communal singing on Zoom, you got to admit, sounds really, really awful.
You can't do it. You can't do it. You can't do it. Yeah, I don't know, James, if you also grew up in the tradition where you did shape note singing. I grew up in a tradition where we did sacred harp, which means that 4 parts would sit across the room from each other. And we would learn a hymn by using a sort of form of do, re, mi, fa, so called solfa. And we would learn a hymn together, and then we would sing it with the words. And that resonance that you're talking about, Sharon, was just palpable. I mean, in the room, singing across from one another, that type of bold singing in a resonant room together is, again, some of my earliest memories. And I think we do miss out on some of that when we have such a performance focused ethic right now. And that's not a slam at all. Please hear me, against any kind of contemporary music at all. But to have people involved in the singing of hymns is, I think, a part of spiritual formation.
It's a full-bodied experience, right? In our church, you stand, you breathe, your body moves, but the doing it with other people, somebody who, they might sing alone in the shower, but when else do you sing with people, right? And if you sing with people, you become bolder because there's noise behind you. It's not just you. That rousing feeling of singing with other people. And then also you sing things you wouldn't normally sing. I mean, I love Led Zeppelin and Chopin, but it's only in church that I would even use some words like round, yawn, mergent. Those are 3 words, they just don't come up in normal conversation. Or I was talking to an old Baptist friend the other day, and he said his favorite hymn was "'Tis So Sweet." You never say "'tis," but you might when you're singing a hymn. So you're keeping sort of some ancient language with some wisdom in it alive, and doing it with other people. It's a powerful thing. We weren't made to be solo Christians.
No, not at all. And of course, in the Methodist tradition, we have a great tradition of hymn singing as being a way of catechesis, right? Of passing on the faith, known as the singing Methodists. I just as a sort of pop culture reality, I don't know how many of us women, maybe men too, watch the Poldark series on PBS, and you see the singing Methodists walking across the countryside of Cornwall, and that being a part of our heritage of passing on the faith.
I think why so many of us are drawn to go to concerts or just to be in that sort of energetic field of voices lifted up. There's nothing quite like it. And to James's point, to then marry that with hymnody and theological truth, there's something to be said for all of that. And I think it'll be interesting to see how we evolve in this virtual world and what shapes singing takes as we move forward. I'm wondering if just in general about Lent. You've talked a little bit about your history with hymnody and music, but I'm wondering about your roots with the practice of Lent. I grew up in a church tradition that did not really pay much attention to the church calendar. And so Lent was something that I learned about in my 30s with any sort of deeper awareness. So I'm wondering if the church calendar is something that's rooted in your history or if you discovered it later in your faith formation. Here's a couple questions together. I wonder, like, as you look forward to the church that's evolving, what do you see an engagement with Lent looking like, both in your past and as we move forward into the future? So whoever wants to start that one out, go for it.
I was under church growing up. I had never heard of Lent until I was in seminary. I was like, what? And I fell in love with it. I'm not sure why, because there's some misery in it, right? Ash Wednesday, it's not a cheerful service with pony rides. It's a somber time. I'm proud of my children. They grew up and they would to this day say, our two favorite services of the year are Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. And for me, that's a measure of spiritual depth. If you're just looking for the, bright, funny, happy, God comforts me, it's the hard things, right? And so Lent says that there's a hard season. You fast, you engage, you couldn't bear it all year long. But you engage this arduous task of trying to grow closer to God. All relationships are that way if you think about it. If they have any quality to them, it's hard. It's a challenge. Anyway, I love Lent. Yeah.
Yeah, I too, Sharon, grew up in a tradition that did not really follow, quote unquote, the church calendar. And I too, James, learned to love Lent in seminary. I too find that depth, especially around Ash Wednesday, the sort of visceral tangibleness of it and the humanity of it is extremely important, at least for me in my own spiritual life. Lent, I hope that in the future people are able to engage with Lent more than just as, I have to give up something, I'm going to give up my favorite TV show, I'm going to give up chocolate, and that the church can grow and evolve in ways to communicate the depth of that tangible viscerality and spirituality in meaningful ways for a new generation.
Yeah, and James, you may have more to say on that. I'll interject here. It's Phyllis Tickle that invited us to look at the period of time we're engaged in as this sort of great garage sale, yard sale, I think she called it, where every 500 years the church goes through massive upheaval and we see what we're going to keep and what we're going to discard of our current practice. And I was talking to a pastor friend the other day who was talking about baptism, and he noted, I really hope we're going to keep that one. He said as we move forward, I think our hope is to keep Lent, but wondering kind of what shape or form. And in light of that, I'm wondering if there have been any changes to your own practice of Lent or your congregation's practice of Lent, given our COVID realities, given the upheaval culturally that we're all experiencing this shift and change culturally, has it affected your engagement or your practice at all?
I remember last year I did a Zoom thing with some folks in one of our retirement communities, and it was on Ash Wednesday. And when we could interact, one woman said to me, she said, "Now, Pastor, don't you ask me to give anything up. I've already given up everything during this pandemic and old age," which was funny. I don't know if it has to be the season of Lent. It's biblical, doing 40 days. That's a Bible thing. But the whole disposition of my life's a mess. I am broken. I am in need of mercy and self-examination. I've said before, when I first started in the ministry, if somebody were to pay me a high compliment for a sermon, they would say, "Pastor, you stepped on my toes today." No one says that anymore. Now, if they want to pay me a compliment, they say, "Pastor, I agree with you." Well, if we're coming to church to see if they agree with us, or as other people say, just for comfort, we're going to miss the depth of the life, which requires, it's a challenge. And what's sin anyway? I think I grew up with it. I didn't hear much about sin, but I think I heard that like God had some rules and I probably broke some of them. And God is really just unhappy with me about this. And there's just better ways to think about sin. What is, I know as a parent, sometimes of my kids, I know you'll find this hard to believe, would do some really stupid things. And if I were a bad parent, I'd get mad at them and say, "You're a stupid child." I'd do something like that. Instead, when my children would do something really dumb, I would just look at them and say, "What was that? Where'd that come from? Is that who you want to be?" And I think this is how God, it's a season when we think about God just saying, how'd you get over there? How did you buy into that political ideology thinking that was the way, the truth, and the life? No, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And it's a time to come home. So it's not a groveling feeling like a schmuck kind of season. It's a redawning to who we are, who we have always been, who we have some amnesia, we've forgotten who we were, whose we were.
No, that's good. A lot of my Lenten practice currently is rooted and grounded in my academic interest in Jewish theology. It's fairly rooted in Jewish theology, and in classic Jewish theology, all of us are standing every day before the tree of life. We have a choice to either allow our Yetzer Hara or our Yetzer Tov, our good intention or our bad intention, to take over. As followers of Christ, we can say that the Holy Spirit is there to help us move in the direction Christ demonstrated that you can live in a direction that is pointed toward leaning toward the tree of life. And so in the season of Lent, and it is exactly, James, I agree. It's a time to examine where are we leaning, and what are we leaning into for life-sustaining support, reality. What is our base and ground? What are our baseline values rooted in? It's all for me about that slowing down and examining which way I'm leaning.
There's a lot there, Kimberly. I have lots of other questions that I will hold until I can have coffee with you soon. I'm wondering, I'm going to shift us a little bit to how we relate to hymns. I will confess to you that my father insisted that we memorize hymns, and did not do it in a really warm, loving way. Which has left me with some unusual relationship with some hymns. I have some friends who really cringe at the language around the blood that comes up in so many hymns. I have friends who have sung hymns that have been written by white people in their Black congregations and heard them very differently depending on what church they were singing them in. So I'm just wondering, in general, when we speak about familiar hymns, so some are familiar to us and not to others, so even the language of familiarity can draw some lines in between us. So hymns that evoke deep love and gratitude in some may not in others. I'm wondering what's been your experience of approaching hymns with this kind of sensitivity. I use the language of gently, you may not, but bringing sort of fresh awareness. What is your experience there?
Yeah, I try never ever, like in preaching, I never say, oh, we all grew up going to Sunday school. Loads of people did. I never say, oh, we all treasure our memories of our grandparents. Some people had terrible grandparents, right? And so I never say, oh, here are the old hymns that we know. Loads of people don't know them, right? So we try to be inclusive at that level. Also, in my book, one of the things it's not a book that just says, oh, all words and hymns are wonderful. There's some that we subject to some critique, right? In one setting, it has a kind of positive meaning, but then another way it can be hurtful. And some just have dumb things. I was on an interview the other day about fasting. And we somehow got to the hymn that says, feed me till I want no more. It's like, feed me. That's not a very Christian sentiment. Or I remember my theology professor at Duke, Robert Cushman, he said the worst hymn in the hymnal is, are ye able, said the master. Because if you look at the story, Jesus asked them, are you able to be crucified with me? And they say, oh, yes. Well, they aren't, right? And so somehow to sort of unpack that, in a way, in a manger, we said, little Lord Jesus, no crying he makes. You know, if you're real sentimental, you go, oh, he didn't even cry as an infant. Well, of course he cried. He was human like we all are, right? So somehow it's not just what can we learn from these words, but how do we process that? How do we bounce that off other things, other contexts, to do it with other people? One of the things that in our church we try to push on is, you know, if you only read the Bible with people that are like you, it's going to be kind of this echo chamber, and it'll undergird your biases, your arrogance, your narrow-mindedness. So read a hymn, sing a hymn, ponder a text with people who are different, have a very different perspective. If you're rich, do it with some poor people. If you're white, do it with some Black people. And you learn a whole lot that way. All languages that way. Religion always has that capacity to be healing, but also hurtful.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That is so spot on, James. Absolutely. And I've often thought, you know, how great it would be. And I've done this some in churches because my last appointment was in a predominantly African-American context, to take hymnody that is considered, you know, or was written, the words were written by a white person or a white man in this case, and compare that to, for instance, maybe some lyrics from Lamar Kendrick or Dr. Dre, or another contemporary artist that is expressing the same kind of sentiment that may have been brought up in the hymn, and use that as levers to get at the deeper meaning, or to critique, as you're saying, some of the things, some of the sentiments that are in some of the hymns that, you know, they're not holy writ, right? So that they things that can be critiqued and richer meaning gathered. So yeah, thank you for that.
And one of the reasons I love this devotional is that it invites us to look at phrases, portions of hymns, and sort of hold them in your mouth like a piece of candy, like you're really noticing what this phrase is saying and indicating. And I found that to be a really unique approach, rather than looking sort of at a whole hymn or the history of the hymn. Let's look at this one phrase and sink deeply into it and allow it some of the attention that a mindful and sensitive approach would create room for, create space for. So James, you in the book, there is a weekly theme for each of the weeks of Holy Week, of Easter, approaching from all the way from Ash Wednesday through Easter. And I'm going to read those. And I just am wondering if there's one that as I read it sparks more alertness for you than others. Does something stand out? The first section is Merciful and Mighty, hymns praising God. The second week, Beautiful Savior, hymns about Jesus. Prone to Wander, hymns of forgiveness. Thy Presence, my light, hymns of vision. With Joy surround you, hymns of beauty. Stony the road, hymns of Holy Week. Love's redeeming work, hymns of Easter. Is there a week's theme there that sparks your attention more than others?
It's so hard. I mean, as you're reading them, I was reminded one of my preaching themes that I think is important. When I teach preaching, I try to remind preachers of this, is that actually at church, we're about God. Sermons should be about God. Hymns are about God. We tend to reduce it to it's me, my faith, my struggle, my holiness, my goodness, whatever. But it's really about God. And actually the antidote to a lot of what's awry in the soul could be if we could learn to praise. That's like almost outdated, right? Not thanking God for what you did for me lately, but God, you're so wonderful. God, you're so beautiful. I'm not sure how to pick among the weeks. I remember Thomas Merton somewhere said, if you have a favorite psalm, and his assumption was you wouldn't have one for life, you'd have one like for a period of your life. He said that would be a gift from God for that period of your life. So different favorite parts are going to hit me at different times. Yeah. Lately, I've been a little more on just sort of the beauty of creation. I'm not naturally a walk outside and soak in the beauty of nature kind of guy. But to develop myself, I've been working on that. And there's some hymns that do that in a really, really remarkable way. And it's not the beauty of nature. It's not just what's photogenic. It's all made by God. The thing that you wouldn't take a photo of and put it on Facebook, that's part of God's wonderful creation as well. And how can we sort of absorb all of that and it's not for our titillation, it's for God did that. God is stupendous. God was lavish. God made, it's just awe-inspiring.
I wonder if you'd read a bit for us from one of the devotionals. Is there one particularly you could pull out and read a portion of for us?
Yeah, Sharon, I knew you were going to ask that. I thought about doing when I survey the Winter's Cross, and not only survey, like you survey something, you don't glance at it. You measure it really carefully. You might even build something on it, right? So that's essentially just the word survey. But I decided to go to this phrase in one of those creation hymns, hearts unfold like flowers before thee, right? And I wrote this about that. Watch flowers. I thought of this, by the way, sitting at this piano, and Lent had started, so it's this somber season. I was looking out my window and flowers are blooming. It was like there's some dissonance there. So here's what I wrote. Watch flowers, don't just glance at them. Give it some time. Flowers take time. They don't sprout up in a jiffy. Gardeners understand that the cultivation and care of flowers requires patience, vigilance, tenderness. The human heart yearns for a Lord and for faithful friends who are patient, vigilant, and tender. Flowers are fragile. That is their wonder. We know that a gust of wind, a scurrying squirrel, or a hard rain might damage them. They are transient like us, and yet they're lovely. Flowers unfold. The bud gradually morphs, and then there's an opening up, a revelation of the beauty that has been hidden until that moment. Jesus preached on a hillside and pointed to the flowers and said, this is God's tender care. It wasn't pointing to a finely manicured flower garden designed by a landscape architect. There were wildflowers popping up anywhere and everywhere. like God's grace. They were unfolding like the hearts of the people of God. And I'll read just a little more. Flowers don't seem to be trying hard. Effortlessly, they defy gravity and adorn even ugly gray places. Their strength is underground, unseen, in the dark, where they reach down like a hungry soul for nourishment and ballast. Yet it's totally involuntary. Paul spoke of the fruit of the Spirit. Fruit, like a flower, doesn't grit its teeth and strive valiantly to be fruit. Growth just happens to the fruit and to the flowers. And it goes on in that vein.
Thank you for reading. And so that's a little sample of what each of the daily readings are like. Each daily reading is quite manageable. It's a devotional in nature. It's a fairly short reading. And then there is invitation in our eCourse to have conversation around the daily readings. And so just a little word about the distinctions between the book and the eCourse. The book is available as a paperback. It's also available as an EPUB or a digital version. And I put links there in the chat where you can go to purchase those. The eCourse has all of the content for the book. So all of the readings are there. And then in addition to that, in addition to the readings, there are also weekly video introductions with James. There is a place for you to add your comments and interact with other people that are in the course with you. And there is also a live session every Wednesday from 12 to 1 Central Time through Zoom, like this one, only more highly interactive. And on those live sessions, I will be guiding those, and then we will have guest participants, guest leaders with us each week to engage in conversation with us and to do some guided spiritual practice, much like the guided spiritual practice we're about to do with Kimberly Orr. So I just want to invite you to consider both of those. Someone asked about the size of the print book, and I will do my best to make my virtual room work for you to take a look at this. It's a smaller book. Oh, thanks, James. Much better view. Yeah, it's pocket size. You can carry it in your backpack or your purse. And that is available, as we said, in the Upper Room online bookstore. Someone asked if the book is purchased separately from the eCourse. All of the material from the book is embedded into the eCourse. So it's all there in a digital space. You can access it there. You can also, some people like to have the print book in their hand while they're going through the eCourse, but you do not have to have both. They're both accessible via Upper Room's websites there that you see the links to in chat. So we'll say a little bit more about that in a moment, but I'd like to invite Kimberly. Kimberly has some beautiful expression of a form of Lectio Divina, which you're probably very familiar with, called Audio Divina. And for some of this is a new practice. For others of us, we're eager to engage in it because it's familiar. But Kimberly, if you will just take the next 15 minutes or so to guide us in this experience of Audio Divina, we'd be grateful for your leadership and guidance.
Thank you so much, Sharon. And it is an opportunity to just savor the hymnody, as James has been saying. And in this space, it's an opportunity for you to explore for yourself. So I invite you to just get in a comfortable position and let's just take a couple of breaths as we enter into a time of exploring a hymn using Audio Divina. So music, as we heard a little bit of a quote earlier, this is actually from a neurologist. Music can heal the wounds which medicine cannot touch. And in our time, as we are continuing throughout this COVID experience, I think it's important that we acknowledge where we are broken, where we are hurting, and allow those life-giving forces and life-giving gifts that God has given us, one of which is music, to continue the process of healing and transformation in an ongoing way. So let's begin our journey together. And this is a little 5-part arc of warming up. Just like if you were going to do your daily exercise, we need to warm up and set our minds and our hearts to listening well and to being ready to receive all that God would have for us in this moment. So again, I invite you to get in a comfortable posture. Many of us carry a lot of tension in our neck and in our jaw. I would like for you to just allow your jaw to relax and your tongue to relax inside your mouth. And then begin to inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth in a very slow, deep rhythm, like an infant. Watching an infant in a crib, their tummy rises and falls effortlessly and deeply. They don't raise their shoulders. They just breathe through the middle of their body. So I invite you, if you'd like to close your eyes, it's optional, but just relax into a slow, steady breath. We'll listen to the song, or at least in part, 3 times. And I invite you to release expectation and approach this time with curiosity. The hymn that we'll be exploring tonight is a very familiar one to many. It is Well With My Soul. Many of us are familiar with the story surrounding the writer of the words, Horatio Spafford, and the loss of his daughters in a shipwreck. But many of us are not familiar with the corollary story with the composer of the music itself. Philip P. Bliss was an American hymn composer, a writer of the music part of the hymns. And he and Horatio Spafford had a missional commonality. They were both acquaintances and worked with, on occasion, the well-known speaker D.L. Moody. And as a matter of fact, Philip Bliss was known as the singing evangelist during his lifetime. But they both had a sad correlation around the shipwreck of the SS Vie du Havre. And this French vessel, again, in which Horatio Spafford's daughters passed away, Philip wrote the hymn tune for Horatio's hymn words, the lyrics, to go with this. And I would like for us, on the biblical perspective, from a biblical perspective, to also think about 1 Thessalonians 5:23. You may want to look that up in your own Bible, where you are, or on your phone or your device. But 1 Thessalonians 5:23 has a corollary, as a way of thinking about this hymn. And the first movement that how we will approach this hymn is with our intellect. with our thoughts, with our intellect. So I've just given you a brief story about the origin of the hymn tune and the hymn words. I've offered a text from Scripture. And so as we listen the first time, I'm going to invite you to just record in some way, either to write down or to just hold in your thoughts. What thoughts arise as you listen to the song or as you think about the story of its origin? It is well with my soul.
When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Though Satan should buffet, though trials should come, let this blessed assurance control that Christ hath regarded my helpless estate and hath shed his own blood for my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. My sin, oh,
So what thoughts arose in your mind? Perhaps there was a word or phrase that stuck out. Perhaps there was a part of the story or part of the scripture text that arose for you. I'd just like you to put in chat perhaps that word or phrase or thoughts that came to mind as you listened to this hymn. Go ahead and drop those in the chat. What connected with your thoughts? Yeah, beautiful stuff. Yeah, the word well, peace like a river. Yes, knowing Christ. Feelings of peace. Yes, comfort. Though Satan should buffet. Yeah, even though we're in distress. Yeah, excellent. It is well with my soul, even during hard times. Thank you. For time's sake, we're going to speed along here. So the next movement is to engage this song, this hymn, with our emotions. Would like for you now to think about how your feelings connect to this song. What colors, images, textures may accompany this song? We're going to listen just briefly to another arrangement of this song and of this hymn, and what colors or textures or feelings arise. And you can just start throwing those in the chat as they come to you as we listen to this arrangement.
When peace like a river attendeth thy way, when sorrows like sea billows roll,
Yeah, I wish we could go on with that arrangement. This is a huge group singing, absolutely a congregation. I just love all of the textures and colors and feelings and emotions that you are putting in the chat. I'm comfort and royal blue and unity and community. Yeah, these are all things that hymns and can just help us engage with, slow down and engage with our emotions. What are we feeling? And to name those things. I want to move on to my favorite part of this experience, this practice. And that's, I would like to invite you to respond to the music and to the hymn with movement. I would like to ask you to, as you feel comfortable, to embody this song. I'm going to play yet another arrangement, this time without the words, and invite you to just move in your space. Whether you want to get up or you just want to be where you are, you may want to drum on the arm of your chair or move your hands or sing along. How would you engage with this hymn through movement? Here we go. So yes, I would love for that to go on. That's Camp Kirkland's arrangement, orchestral arrangement of it as well. I hope you were able to find a movement or an engagement. May perhaps you sang along, but it's part of who we are is to engage with our whole body and to embody our whole selves and to embody. The music is a helpful way of, I think, engaging in this spiritual practice. So finally, we have a cool down. What is your response, your reflection? Perhaps there's just a spontaneous prayer based on this hymn that you would like to offer to God in this moment. Perhaps you'd like to jot down a few sentences, or again, go back and reflect on some of those words a little later or tomorrow. Or perhaps there's a sketch or a painting that you want to create, or some other expression. I just invite you to find a time, either after our time together tonight or tomorrow, to engage with this hymn one more time and to reflect. I just invite you to put perhaps your prayer or your 1 or 2 word reflection in the chat as we close our time together. I know this has been brief, but it's just a taste test of what Audio Divina can be. Here is the links to the arrangements of the hymn that I played this evening. You can hold up your phone and use your photo, your camera to use the QR code, and you can just hold your phone up and click the link that appears on the camera, and it will take you to the slide bank that we use this evening, and it will have the links to the hymns there for you. So thank you so much, and I pray that this was an experience to engage you a little more deeply and to slow down in the hymnody of the church. Thank you.
Kimberly, thank you so much. So friends, I hope you're getting a bit of a taste of what all we are inviting you into. We are inviting you to engage with James Howell's book, perhaps in a small group in your church, perhaps on your own as you read through the daily readings. Perhaps you would like to join us for our eCourse, where we will be doing a variety of things, such as what Kimberly offered us an example of right here. So we'll be reading James's book together. We will be commenting and reacting, and then we'll also be introducing a variety of guests who engage us in spiritual practice around hymns and hymnody the way that Kimberly has this evening. So lots of different ways for you to connect this Lent with this really meaningful material that brings us really with, offers us some fresh awareness of some things that may be familiar, and reintroduces us to things we haven't, hymns we haven't thought of for a while, gives us an invitation to a deeper dive into just single phrases from a variety of hymns, and walks us through Lent with a invitation to do what the upper room invites us to do, which is to create daily life with God. We're invited to create daily life with God. Couple basic questions are coming up about the online course. Each session on Wednesday is 1 hour long. It's recorded so that if you cannot come during the live session, you can watch the recording later. The rest of the course is what we call asynchronous. That means you can do it whenever you want to. It's not at any given time. The only piece of it that's at a given time are the Wednesday afternoon sessions, and even those are recorded if you want to watch those later. The book is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so there is no time constraint around reading that book. Well, friends, you will receive an email from us likely tomorrow with a link to the recording of tonight's event, as well as some other information about the eCourse and the book. But as we wrap up this evening, I want to invite James to just send us out with any closing comments you have, and we would ask for a blessing. And so if you will send us out, we would be grateful.
Thank you. I would just, thinking about that hymn, I think about Julian of Norwich, who was a medieval mystic, should have been a saint. Back in the 14th century, she was closed in a cell in a room. She was like the pandemic, right? She was closed inside. And this was during the plague of Egypt, right? So a time worse than ours, but similar to ours. And what Jesus kept saying to her all that time was, all will be well. All will be well. Just hearing the words, you begin to believe it. You begin to live into it. It's the ultimate truth. All will be well. So friends, I would send you out with that. All will be well. Jesus' word to all of us. Thanks be to God.
Amen. Friends, it's been a delight to have you all here. Thanks to James and Kimberly particularly. And for Ben, who has undergirded us with the tech support. Just delightful to have all of you here, and hope to see you in our online course, or to have some virtual awareness that you're reading out there. Blessing, friends. Good night.